All right, I'm showing 7:30, so let's get rolling. So welcome to the Capital Planning Committee meeting for Tuesday, October 13th, 7:30 p.m. All members are present. I'm going to read our preamble. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting, the Southborough Capital Planning Committee, will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. We are officially called to order, so I will go to approval of meeting minutes for September 14th and October 5th. We do not have October 5th meeting minutes, so we're looking at the proposed changes that were discussed in issued in track changes mode from the September 14th item. Any questions or comments on those as edited? The only thing, Jeff, I had on that was it's historic commission, not committee. I think it's in the townhouse update area. So I will move that we approve those minutes as edited. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Braccio?
Aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Hark?
Aye.
Palmer?
Aye.
Pfaff?
Aye.
And Malinowski, aye. Next item is the townhouse project. So you all were forwarded a copy of the application that was sent by Mr. Parent to the townhouse, to the CPC, Community Preservation, just to don't confuse it with ourselves. And that's now on their docket. I have no idea when they are meeting to consider those, but I would think that any support that this committee can offer during that meeting, even if it's just to speak to why the project should be combined together and move forward now versus waiting, will be helpful. I mean, I don't know what the questions will be, but I will keep the committee updated on that. Mr. Parent will, I know he's in the audience, but when we pull him in to actually talk about his FY22 capital request, I think you can all imagine the amount of work that went into it, both in terms of conducting the actual engineering assessment with the firm, but liaising with not only historical, but other committees and really drafting the entire submission with very minimal edits or feedback changes needed. So it's a monumental effort. I just wanted to recognize his contributions on that, and hopefully it's a step in the right direction. Any questions on that? South Union School, I have not seen an appraisal yet. So pursuant to our conversation at the last meeting, we will discuss with BOS how they want to proceed and what involvement they would like from us once those come in, depending on whether it's a general session or executive and what sort of strategy they want to take from here on out. Questions on that? ClearGov, the capital module is fully up and running. You should all get view rights to it soon. They're working through trying to mirror as best as possible kind of some of the pivots that we've come used to in terms of discussing town meeting approvals, fiscal year approvals, funding sources, et cetera. At least my initial preview, and it was about a half an hour preview with Brian and the rep from ClearGov, was I think it's going to provide a lot of visibility into where we're going, but also very easy to create a chain of approval processes and really put some controls in place around how submissions are being generated. And it'll also allow the department heads to write a justification so that, of why they're seeking that item, why that's the right year, why that's the right timing. And it'll also allow the town finance team to talk about the funding sources and why the funding source is being used, and are we bonding, are we using general fund, et cetera. But all of that can change and create a trail as well, which I thought was useful to our discussions, because as much as people may go through our minutes, I think it's a lot easier to kind of go through the history of an item as well, live. So I think where we're going to go with that is there's a form that needs to be generated for departments to submit capital requests going forward. I think that's something we should discuss in an open meeting of how that should look, what sort of data you all want on it, so that we are getting the right data to be able to vet it, right? Absent the department head coming, I think it's always nice to have a story behind what they're asking for as well, so that memorializes the request, and we can always update it if additional questions or support come out of any discussions we have in an open meeting. So I think you'll see that on a future agenda. We'll pull the form up live. I'll make sure everyone gets a screenshot of it ahead of time. I don't know how to do that yet, but bear with us. I know Brian's been tinkering around with a few different versions too, and has been very helpful thinking about how we roll this out. My goal would be to at least try to use that as some sort of dashboarding concept with BOS when we meet with them later this month, just so they can kind of see what it will look like, to parallel any slides. I'm not sure I'm going to achieve that goal, but that's, I guess, the goal I'm setting up. Any questions, comments on that?
So Jason, I haven't seen ClearGov at all, so I'm talking from total ignorance here. Does the capital module also keep track of the debt amortization that is happening too? So it's all, that's part of that module, not part of the regular ClearGov?
I don't know if it's also part of ClearGov too. I'll defer to Brian on that, but I can tell you the way that the capital plan was uploaded into ClearGov was to track it in the same way we're all tracking it in the current Excel form. That, like, for example, there's 4 tranches of public safety debt. You'll see all 4 tranches there in the runoff of it for the next 20 years, or there's obviously some that have less term than that. Brian, do you want to comment on the regular ClearGov and how that deals with debt?
Yeah, I would say that to Kathy's question, it does track the debt that's been already bonded. The only thing I think Jason and myself and maybe Mark had talked about is we probably need to extend the terms out, because we have a 10-year term right now, and obviously some of this debt goes beyond that. So we're probably going to have to just extend the schedules a bit. But yes, it does track the debt already bonded.
And my follow-up question, Brian, since you're on, and again, everybody else may know this, I don't. How does the capital module interface with what I'm just calling the regular budget module as far as bringing over the debt service, the projected debt service for the budget year, the capital that is not being bonded, et cetera? How do they interact with each other?
So they can interact. I think the quick answer is we haven't finalized how the two are going to match. Right now, the capital is sort of a little bit segregated from the budget module, the operational accounts, I call them. But they, in theory, and from what I understand, can match together and bring all that information at one point. So we're going to have a little more discussion on that, but we're still working through it a little bit.
Okay.
Any other ClearGov questions? Okay, I have a few more updates, but I'm going to actually do them as part of FY22 capital when we get to certain items. So I'm going to move on to school research subcommittee standing update. So the school research subcommittee kicked off last Thursday. As you know, Kathy and I are members with Katura Martin from the school committee. The superintendent and Keith Lavoy also joined. I would say it was a very collaborative meeting and continued to echo, some of the early workings that I had seen in just my discussions with the chair of the Southborough School Committee. We are meeting every other week now on Thursdays. So if any of you want to tune in and stay up to speed on some of the details around that, there'll be kind of a regular standing agenda there. We did get a lot of data. Some of it's already been somewhat analyzed, but we're still working through getting more data around the enrollments. Kathy specifically is taking charge on kind of a decision tree that we're going to vote on as a subgroup next meeting in terms of where the various decision points will come, both from a school committee perspective, but broader committee in terms of go, no-go decisions. And then I'm working with the superintendent and his team to kind of look at the enrollment data, see if it tells us any stories, and also thinking through what decisions we can and can't make with the data before moving on to more, broad conversation. So it was slightly over an hour meeting. It was really to get ourselves organized and on the right track. But I think we're going to have a pretty aggressive schedule, as you can tell from every other week for the next couple of weeks up until roughly around Thanksgiving, in which time we'll kind of be able to come back with something more formal of at least where we're headed. I don't know if we're going to have any decisions by then. And likely we try to line up, hopefully, with the December school committee meeting. Kathy, would you add anything from that?
No, other than I don't think you meant to imply, we don't know how long this is going to take.
Yeah.
So we're going to go as fast as we can, but this is serious business, so we'll see.
Any other questions on school research? All right. I'm going to combine items 5 and 6 together tonight. And I had sent around an Excel sheet to everyone today to try to organize us as best as possible to keep us on point. I do see department heads for fire, facilities, recreation, in MIS in the audience. So just so everyone's aware of the process, after our last meeting, I went back to each department head and basically gave them a screenshot of what we were carrying in their capital plan for this year and told them that we were going to be discussing and voting on it tonight. And I also sent a email with Mark and Brian to all department heads, even if they didn't have anything in the capital plan, to make sure that there wasn't sitting out there on someone's mind that they were going to bring forward as part of the operational budget, given that this is a new process for them this year and we're obviously ahead of the operational budget. I did get 2 replies to that. So I figured I would spend a few minutes just talking about that, and they're not for consideration tonight. And candidly, I don't think they're coming forward, but I didn't want to unilaterally make a decision. So the first was from the Board of Health Director. He brought forward the ongoing conversation related to Breakneck Hill. He alerted me to the fact that Board of Health will be making some recommendations of what potentially needs to happen up on Breakneck Hill related to concerns that have been raised about, I guess they've been raised with the EPAs, at least my understanding, or DEP, I can't remember which one. But Board of Health ultimately will have jurisdiction on making a decision of what maybe needs to be done there. There's nothing to consider at this point. I'm not sure whether there will be anything to consider, but he at least wanted to raise it. And I told him, well, once Board of Health makes a decision on what you're looking to see done, then maybe there should be a discussion of whether this is even a capital item or it's just another standalone article that needs to go before advisory and BOS, but doesn't necessarily come before this committee. So I don't have any other information than that, other than I don't know what they're looking for. I don't have a cost, and I'm not sure it's this year, but I told them to keep me updated. And obviously, if something comes forward, we can certainly consider the right timing. So pause there before going on to the second item. The second item was from the assessor, and Brian certainly chime in here. Apparently there is a service that they conduct, I believe it's every 10 years, related to how they assess property in the town. Historically, this had been carried in the capital plan Excel spreadsheet because it's an item that they need to be able to carry from year to year to expend the money. Like they can't just have it in a 1-year budget. And it is a large number. I think it was close to $70,000. So it had always been carried in Brian's spreadsheet for capital, just so they didn't lose sight of it. But it's not in our capital plan because it's really a service, not a capital item. So at least my initial reaction, and I believe Brian and Paul as the assessor and Mark, was it just should be a standalone item at town meeting that's obviously subject to advisory and BOS approval, but it shouldn't come before capital because it's a service, not an actual capital expenditure. So I guess, Brian, before I open it to the committee, is there anything else you would add to that?
No, I think you hit it right. And this falls back onto, in forming the capital committee, we've had some incidents where certain items were in the quote unquote capital consideration that really aren't capital. They're service items, they're, things that I used to call in years past budget articles, sort of refilling the retirement article or the ADA study, things that were raised last year actually that were questioned was, why is this in capital? So this is an item I think that's going to go forward as a budget article, a budget money article, but it's not really capital. It's more an advisory item that'll be reviewed by the selectmen and advisory and determined by them to support or not to support. Clearly assessing services for consulting items probably don't fall into capital areas. So I think it's pretty straightforward, but if there's any questions, we can follow up with it.
Well, briefly, a few years ago, and it's probably 15 now, advisory added language to the bylaw, one of the bylaws. I don't know where it is, but it's in there that defines a capital item as something that's got a useful life of 3 years or more. We tried to make it clear what a capital item was. So it sounds like we're going the right direction here as far as understanding what a capital item is and what it's not. But we actually did define it.
Kathy, didn't we approve that amount for this budget year?
I thought so. I was going to say the same thing, Andrew. I thought, I guess I'm wrong. Yeah, I thought we already did this for Paul. He was going through his once every 10 year.
Or did he pull it out at the last second? I think he might have pulled it out. I'm trying to remember.
Well, we definitely talked about it. It definitely was in there at one point. So anyway, I'm not sure we should spend a lot of time on it, but it does.
Okay.
It's right. It's not a capital item. I agree.
So I'm going to keep us moving then. That's clearly something that will fall back to BOS and advisory to make sure. Either it should be in this year or it was in last year. So unless anyone disagrees, what I was going to do to respect the time of the department heads that did come, I was going to do their budgets first, their capital items first, which I just is going to go in alphabetical order, and then come back to the departments that aren't here. I had specifically asked Mr. Parent and Chief Achilles to join us based on discussions we had in prior meetings and knowing some of the items they had on here. No one else had requested any of the other department heads. So I told them we were going to be discussing their items tonight. They're welcome to join, but no one had expressed any concerns. I did advise all department heads that their attendance at the BOS meeting at the end of the month was strongly recommended. Because ultimately, by that point, they would then have a vote of support from capital and hopefully BOS, which would then just leave however advisory is going to deal with this, Kathy. And vote this in timing, et cetera. So is everyone good with that approach? Okay. So John, I'll bring you in first. And Chief Achilles, you're on deck. So while John sets up, we have a few items that are under consideration. We have Quarterville Hall. We have the library. We have the townhouse bathroom and interior. We have the townhouse installation of emergency generator. We have the townhouse windows. We have the townhouse exterior renovation work. And we have the regular facilities maintenance item that is carried every year for $100,000.
Jason, that's one I was wondering whether or not that's capital.
So you want to start there?
If we could just go there, and then if we can cross it off, that helps.
You're talking about the 100K?
Yeah. I mean, is there a useful life of 3 years for whatever that is? I don't think so. It's regular operating maintenance.
Yep, that was put in place a few years ago at the request of Al Hamilton, who was really trying to determine what the depreciation of the buildings were. And so instead of doing that, this was what we decided to do instead, because there's always surprises during the year. So John Parent can project all he wants to. He's always going to be surprised by something. So this is nothing more than a fund for him to use for miscellaneous unexpected repairs.
So Mark or Brian, this is your chance to weigh in, because I don't think this is John's decision. Like, what is your thought there? I think it's a valid point, but I think this goes to defining how we view capital going forward and create a comparative view for departments.
Well, my opinion before Mark speaks is that, you know, this is a little bit of a gray area. Technically, no, I don't think it's a black and white capital item, but it does go to maintenance of your capital, you know, your capital stock. So I kind of feel like it should be at least reviewed by the capital committee and weighed in on. Again, it's not black and white, but that's my opinion. I don't know if Mark has a different opinion on that.
Mark, you're on.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking for the button. I don't necessarily disagree with Brian, but you know, I think individually some of the improvements that are done, you know, with this money may not, to Andrew's point, rise to you know, the literal interpretation of a capital item. But I do think, you know, I do agree with advisory setting this up, you know, when they did, even though I wasn't here, we're just, you know, benefiting from it now. And I think that now that John has really got, you know, a good staff that is really able to do a lot of this work in-house, and we're basically paying for supplies and everything with this money, we're getting a lot more value out of you know, out of that money.
Yeah, I mean, I would lump this in, Jason, with the road and sidewalk maintenance, quote unquote. I mean, it's in here just so they can pool the money for a multiple year, you know, investment. But I don't know if there's a different categorization we can have besides capital or capital fund, or I don't know. It's not a revolving fund, but something. But
I guess how I would view that a little differently, Andrew, in terms of the comparison to road and sidewalk, is like, if you think about the conversation we had at the last meeting, we talked a lot about the Quarterville Road project, right? And how that's a standalone project, right? That Karen's going to undertake at some point here, subject to town meeting approval. And we may decide in those years, right, that you don't need a road maintenance budget plus Quarterville for at least a few years, right? I don't know if that's where we're going to go or not, based on the condition of obviously other roads. But I would say on this particular item on facilities, I think the decision should come down to, like, is there a maximum dollar threshold that John can spend out of there, which goes to what policy do we want to set, which is another agenda item we have for tonight. Like, can he spend 75,000 of that on one facility for a major repair? Or is there a cap with how the rules work on that, with what thresholds need further approval? I think that's how I draw the line, because if you're going and spending 75,000 out of that on one building for something that really should have come before the voters for approval versus true repair of a building because a pipe went or something like that. I think that's how I'm trying to weigh that. Are there any parameters around that, Brian and Mark, based on the wording that goes before town meeting?
No, Jason, I don't think so. I kind of agree with you. Again, it's a little bit of an oddity, but again, it's, pointed at your capital inventory. So I think at least the capital committee should have at least an opinion on it. Maybe not, maybe not as black and white as a fire truck or an ambulance or something, but I do think it directly relates to, capital items. So that's where I fall.
Have we used the 100 every year? Does it keep accruing? Do we have a big surplus in that fund or?
Oh, it's a warrant article, so it stays open. John tends to use most of it. He's never gone over. We've only had one time where we had the big expenditure at the townhouse for the septic system issue there. So I respectfully disagree with Brian. I think this is not in our bailiwick at all. I think it's worked well for many, many years now. It's $100,000. It's not $1 million. And it's there to basically allow John to have money when things come up that aren't expected. And that's going to happen every single year with the old inventory of buildings that we have here. So it's really mostly repair stuff. He's not spending money on new stuff. For the most part, he's fixing things that need to be fixed that we didn't know need to be fixed when the budget was approved.
So should this be just the repair line item in the operating budget?
Well, then you can't carry it over. That's why it's a warrant article, so that it stays there. And then, so it doesn't get closed out, so it stays there.
Yeah, but I would say the only reason for having it as a rollover is if we were trying to save up to do a $300,000 project in 3 years, which to Jason's point should be coming to capital anyway.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right, but because it gets used most anyway, so it's almost not needed to be a warrant article, but that's just how we did it back then, and we just haven't changed it. So it doesn't have to be a warrant article because he does spend most of it. So there's very little left in it every year. So we always ask him advisory, what's left? Let's see what we start with. So make sure there's enough. So it doesn't have to be a warrant article. I'm not married to that, but I don't think this belongs under the capital planning committee bailiwick approval at all.
Any other thoughts?
If you were to move to advisory, how hard would it be to find that money next year?
We would just move it from capital to operating. It was
Just goes
not
up.
a budget.
But isn't it, all right, it's just a wash.
Yeah, same effect.
Yeah.
If you didn't use it and you were starting to build up money like we have done other things, it'd be a different story. But Jason's right. We use it for Andrew's right. We use most of it. So is John still here? I don't know.
I'm right here.
Yeah.
He's got to say. So John, we're talking about you. So I don't know if you have any comments on this.
Basically, I can assure you that the money is used for repairs, and the purpose is not to ever spend it down. My goal is to make sure there is money left year after year. I mean, if I ever had a year where there's $50,000 left, I'd expect you to look at it and say, well, maybe we're only going to put 60,000 in it this year because it's 50 grand still sitting here. But the goal is never to take it to zero. The goal is never to run out of the money. It's for repairs and maintenance for the most part. We do a lot of plumbing and stuff. We do a lot of unexpected electrical problems that pop up where materials are expensive that you have to fix things. Elevator repairs, those are huge when they hit. That could be $8,000, $10,000, one pop. So this fund is definitely necessary. And to an extent, it does kind of operate like an operating budget line item, but having the ability to roll it over, I think, is prudent in such an article or, the way we're handling it.
All right.
So I don't hear anyone arguing with the fact supporting the 100,000 in the concept. It's just a matter of whether we call it a capital item or not. I really was indifferent when the comment was raised initially. The only benefit that I just want to throw out of keeping it as capital item is we're all young in terms of this committee, in terms of how we are looking at things. And I kind of would like to understand where John's spending, like what buildings are having the issues and how that money's being spent, because that may start to inform some of the decisions we start to make longer term. You may not develop any trend out of that. I fully realize, like I know John and I spoke about money he was spending in the public safety building today, for example, right? But, it's still, given we have an oversight role of capital items as well, it's just helpful to know where it's going. And we may not always be fortunate to have someone like John in that seat, right? Like John will retire at some point. And I think I don't want to make a decision now that impacts us later. So as long as we're okay with the 100,000, I think we can continue the conversation of where it should go as we get closer to town meeting, because I don't know that that's really something we have to decide on tonight. I think what we need to make sure is we're comfortable with carrying 100,000 for repairs to capital assets each year. So is everyone at least on board with that?
That's where the argument used to be. There were many that thought it should be a whole lot higher. Al Helms thought it should be $1 million. So we had a big range of what we thought it should be. So that was always the discussion, is how much. And then we settled on 100, and we've kept it for many years. So that to me is what should continue to be discussed, is 100 the right number.
And I think you address my original concern through policy in terms of if John was going to go spend 50,000 out of this on one item, that there be some approval process. I'm not wed to what that is, but you could address that as that's a capital asset now. That's beyond a repair. Like there's thresholds out there for what's a repair and maintenance versus capital item is, those in the accounting world, at least, there's de minimis thresholds. So can we move on from that one? I think we have a general direction on. Okay.
Are we going to vote on these, Jason? Should we just, or what?
I was going to do each department unless someone, I was going to do it by department unless someone had a hold on one of them.
Yep.
Okay. So on the exterior work in the windows, I guess before we go to John with any questions on it, I was going to suggest we combine this. This should be one line item, in my opinion. It's one project going before CPC. It's hopefully one project coming to town meeting floor. And I think the main reason we do that is the main reason it's sitting here right now this way is mainly because it was always carried as two separate projects. But early on, this committee decided we should just do it all at once to get the synergies of construction. So does anyone have any objection to combining them?
Nope. I would just say put in the actual CPA money amount.
Yes. So the 400 and the 1.8 they were carrying is just going to become 2.2. That's all that's going to happen on the sheet. So questions for John on the project itself? Okay. I'm just going backwards up because of where we started. So I'm going to go to installation of emergency generator. So I personally wanted to discuss this one. I don't know if anyone else does. This is just to align on the scope of the project. This would be taking the old generator from the fire station that used to exist on Main Street. It's currently sitting in what I'll call dry dock. I think that's the word you use, right, John? To be repurposed to the townhouse. I asked the question why we weren't really seeking grant funding for this. We've never had a generator at the townhouse. I can understand the need in certain situations to have a generator. Last week, for example. But at the same time, these are the things that are usually well covered by grant funds, both federal and locally. And I was also concerned with the fact that we're reusing an asset as opposed to just starting from scratch. And given that this town now has one more facility with a powerful generator than it did a year ago in the public safety facilities, and we also have Quarterville, and I'm not sure about the schools, John. But we already are up one generator facility already in this town. I didn't see this as something that was a pressing need that we needed to spend taxpayer funds out of. So John, maybe can you elaborate with how this came to be, what the resale value is of that generator that's sitting in dry dock now, and what the engineering plans call for at the townhouse, which obviously is not like an emergency operations center, et cetera, but it does obviously house critical documents.
Basically, how it came to be is when the old fire and police stations were going to be sold off to St. Mark's in the land transaction for the public safety complex. The idea came forward that perhaps we should take one of the generators and we may be able to repurpose it at Town Hall. Okay, now at the time we had looked at, well, maybe, we should get a grant for a new one. It might be better than using the old one. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at the grant situation. But the town at the time wasn't eligible for a grant for a generator at that time. So we decided to put it to dry dock until such a time when we would become eligible. Now, the theory behind it was, if we can get a grant, and the last grant cycles we did at the DPW and Quarterville Hall for generators were 75-25, where the grant was 75%, the town only had to pay 25% of the total cost. Which again, needless to say, if we could acquire a new generator as opposed to one that's 10 years old, and you're only paying 25%, I would highly recommend you go for the grant cycle and try to acquire one in that direction. Now, if that were to fail, you would get turned down for a grant. You could use the one you have there, or we could do what was recommended in an engineering study years ago. At the town hall, they looked at it and they determined that, for that particular building at the time, perhaps a better option would be to put basically a port on the side of the building and a portable generator in case you ever have an emergency situation where you just need to keep the building safe. And given the fact that we are so mobile now, thank you, COVID, everyone could pretty much work off-site, but we would still need to protect the building. So it would be, doable to have a port on the side of the building and hook into a portable generator, keep heating systems going, so forth. But again, if you could get a grant cycle where you are approved, that would be my number one option recommendation in this case. As for resale value on the existing generator that is in dry dock, I talked to Milton Cat, they're our generator service company, when we moved the generator, and they estimate it be in the ballpark of about $20,000 for that unit.
John, do you remember how much the one at Quarterville cost?
Oh, I think we put out somewhere in the ballpark of 20,000. Don't quote me on it, but I think we're in the ballpark of 20.
It was about 80 altogether.
Yeah, pretty sure that one was. DPW was higher given this capacity difference.
Okay. And would the generator that we have, could you put that on a trailer and make it a portable one?
No, the one we have, it's massive. It is a huge generator.
And the
And to move
Quarterville
that
Hall
much-
one that's our emergency facility, right? If there's an emergency, that's where people go, and that's why we did that for the most part there, correct?
Quarterville, yes.
So I would say, Jason, my first reaction is we already own the generator and it's still just about as expensive as doing the one at Quarterville. It seems like it's for $65,000 more for just the installation. I mean, if that was $10,000, I wouldn't be as hesitant, to do that project, but at 65 seems high. I think John's idea of using a portable one and putting a port in the side and selling this one for 20 and doing that is a much better use of the money. But John, was it 65? Is that firm or is that just a finger in the air?
Working numbers between my electrician and the electrical inspector, because the problem we have is the transfer switch with the existing generator is way too tall for the townhouse and it cannot be mounted horizontally. So you would have to get a new transfer switch that is actually weatherproof. That is an expensive little endeavor.
Gotcha.
So I'm with Andrew. This sounds like a lot of money just to move and install an old generator.
What would it cost to do the port and install for a portable generator?
The estimate from the engineering company on the wiring and the transfer port itself was $16,000 a few years ago. Again, that could be up, that could be down, given how the economy is at this point. Again, then we'd have to look at a generator. I did speak with Neil Espasy. The engineering study recommended an 80,000 kilowatt. Neil currently has a 52,000, I believe it is, where you'd only be looking at a necessity to run the heat and lights just to maintain the building, given a situation where under a catastrophic incident, we could relocate people or work from home, most likely. The 50-something thousand should be more than adequate to handle what we need to handle. We'd want to keep, of course, the McAuliffe room up and running as a primary source. If we have to put on messages and stuff, that's literally the heart of the organization.
And what
Wouldn't
is
the
that?
message, couldn't you go to wouldn't the key personnel be in the EOC at the fire and public safety building?
Absolutely could be there too, if you wanted to, yeah. I was thinking more
Well, isn't
BOS.
But John, how much was the 52 KW?
We already have that one in stock. That's one that is through EOC.
Oh, okay.
So it sounds like Andrew, Kathy, and myself are aligned. I don't know, Joe, Lisa, Jeff, if you're of the same viewpoint.
Yeah, I'd say sell this one, do the port, use the other generator.
So it's effectively, you're saying it's a wash.
Yeah, we could sell this one for 20, pay for the 20 for the port and use the generator we already have.
Yeah, and save the 65,000.
Yeah.
Again, that's if you get the 20. Remember, they're giving you an estimate. So,
But so John, let's just say you got 15, right?
yeah, you'd still be.
This would be a good use of your facilities maintenance budget too.
I was waiting for you to say that actually when you just said that.
So, all right. So I think we're gaining consensus here. The other idea I'll throw out there is I don't think you have to rush to do this. I think you should still pursue the grant opportunities for the whole thing.
I would agree.
You have a match, right? You're going to have reasonable proceeds.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if we need to find a few $1,000s to save 65,000, this town will figure it out.
Right. And I want you to keep in mind that say we have a worst case scenario, we have a massive ice storm in the middle of winter. Now I'd reach out to Neil Space and say, look, do you have a portable heating source we could use for town hall just to keep us from freezing? If he didn't, say it was already lent out to another town or something, I'd drain the heating system. I mean, I can winterize a building relatively quickly if I have to winterize one. I mean, everyone's always in fear of a building freezing. It takes.
You just muted yourself, John. He was very
I talked with my
excited.
hands a lot. That was a dream come true for most of you.
Now, John, if we went with the port route and we got a grant later, could you basically use that port for a permanent generator and use the same transfer case or transfer box?
I believe they'd be able to tie through that port.
Okay.
Into the wiring down below. But again, if you get a grant, they'd still take you from soup to nuts.
Yeah. What I'm saying, in the meantime, if we want to have an option, we do the port, and then if we get a grant, we don't, in theory, need as big of a grant. Okay.
So, Mark, being the town administrator, I think, do you have any views to the contrary? You can tell where the committee's going. I guess this is, as someone that oversees a lot of personnel in that building. Any thoughts that we should be considering?
Well, at the end of the day, I can be fine with either approach. I mean, for continuity of service, yes, I think one thing COVID has proven is that we can go remote. Is it perfect? No. And while I don't disagree that, there would be the ability, I mean, that was why we outfitted the new public safety facility, especially the training room, with a lot of jacks for data and for phones and everything else, so that we could put people down there if we needed to. But, it depends what we're talking about and what type of an emergency. If I've got the EOC open, you can't be putting staff down there that aren't really related to the emergency.
But then they're probably not needed at that point, though, Mark. Right, like in terms of.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a couple of instances though where we've lost power completely at the townhouse for multiple days, and it's not an ideal situation, and having a generator, would alleviate some of those circumstances. But, like I said, if we want to, go and put in a port and, we'll kind of go on the pay as you go plan, for bringing in a portable generator if we need it, that's fine. If a grant opportunity, I know that Neil is currently pursuing that for the townhouse. Supposedly with some of the funding available, generators are now back in vogue, with the funding opportunities. So the likelihood is that something will probably swing our way, and maybe, something for us to consider in the spring. But, I guess, If we want to hold pat, we can hold pat for now.
So Mark or John, correct me. I don't think Neil was pursuing anything because I think there's a designation that we don't have as a community that I think we're pursuing a designation that would allow us to apply for certain grants. So I think we have some work to do. I just don't want to have the committee be misled that we're actively in a grant cycle like we have for some of the fire stuff. Because that's
Well,
not the case.
Currently no cycle.
My understanding, Jason, is we've achieved the MVP status that we need, and Chief Achilles is in the audience. He's got his hand up.
Yeah.
I spoke with the chief last week, and Neil is actively, pursuing that now. Where he is in the process, I can't tell you.
What is the acronym you just used? M?
Yes, yes, MVP. And now you can ask what it means. But Neil had worked with conservation with Melissa Danza for us to achieve this status, and it's something that we need in order to be eligible for certain grants.
Yeah, but so Mark, before I go to Chief Achilles, my understanding is that's a state item. The designation that John and I were just referring to is a FEMA item. It's a federal item. So Chief, I don't know if you want to react in here.
There is a FEMA hazard mitigation grant. It's called the Building Resilient and Infrastructure Communities Grant. It's a BRIC grant. We were made aware of this probably 3 or 4 weeks ago. I did talk to John and I talked to Lieutenant Spazey on, is this an opportunity that we should pursue? So I put it out there. I think Neil's starting to do the legwork to see if we are poised in a good position to apply for it. So we'll continue to pursue that if that's the wish. I think it gives us an opportunity. I don't think it's guaranteed. I'd also just weigh in that after this past week and knowing that from emergency management standpoint, having that building up and running, that we don't have to burden the public safety building if something happened, especially if they needed to have continuity of operations over a period of time. There is value of having that building on generator backup.
Jason, if I may, I don't know if
Go ahead, Lisa.
this potentially is for you, Chief. I know my only concern with not taking the time to do this is with COVID. I mean, we've shown that we can work from home and continuity of business can continue. So I'm just not sure. And John or Mark or someone can address, the need to have to do this now versus actually taking the opportunity and seeing if there's a better, less expensive way or grant opportunity to fund this.
Well, I think we just agreed that, we can wait for the grant opportunity. I think that's the most reasonable way to do it. We've been very fortunate. Lieutenant Spazey has done a nice job in working through this process already to get the generator for DPW and the generator for Quarterville. So, I think he's got a very good track record, and we'll wait until we're able to do that, to do it through a grant, for the townhouse.
All right, I misunderstood. I thought there was an urgency being put on it that I didn't understand. So thank you.
Jason, to that effect, would we want to amend this to a match?
Well, I guess the question is, if we think that there's a right, like what is the process to declare that generator surplus property at this point? And we won't know ultimately what the proceeds are, but right, Mark, my understanding is it BOS that would have to declare it a surplus asset and then you'd have to auction it off? Or how does that work?
Whether we would, we'd have to declare it surplus, and we would then probably do sealed bids with it, Jason.
Okay. So I guess, Andrew, that's the question is, if you get an amount that's somewhere 15 to 20,000, do you need anything?
Yeah, that might be your match. Exactly. Okay. Makes sense.
What was the last thing you said, Andrew?
I said that then you wouldn't need a match for the 25% for your grant if you had the 15 or 20K in theory, or if you needed a match, it would be much less.
I'm confused. I thought we've agreed that we are going to sell the O generator, or at least recommend to the BOS to sell the O generator. And that
Yeah.
we are going to have a port installed so that we can bring in a temporary mobile generator if we had to. At the same time, pursue any grant opportunity if there is to get a new permanent generator.
That's correct.
I think the question is whether or not, to Mark's opinion, whether or not he needed the port and wanted the port, or whether or not we would just wait for the grant.
Jason, Jason, John, what is the difference between the port as we're discussing and the conduit that was already put in the ground underneath before the parking lot was paved over?
To my understanding, the conduit would go directly to the transfer switch. Honestly, where we've gone this long without one, I would probably recommend you just wait for the grant cycle. If that doesn't pan out, then we can go to the port on the building. Because again, when they design for the grant cycle, you're also going to have engineering money in there. They're going to take you from out in the parking lot through the conduit right in the building, and they're going to design it exactly how it should be. So for us to try to guess the exact port and stuff they're going to want to use with the exact generator they pick, you're kind of grasping at straws.
Okay. I think we have a direction on generator. We'll formalize it with a motion, but I'm going to move on unless someone. Chief, I'm going to keep you in here, but obviously I see you're on mute, but feel free to weigh in on any of these other items if you'd like. Next item is townhouse bathroom and interior renovations. This is $80,000. I know we've talked about it at many other meetings and it's come down. I think that this thing we really discussed was we were hoping it could be done during COVID, but there's obviously no funding to do it right now because it obviously would require maybe shutting down a floor or a section of the building. So are there any other questions for John? Similar, library interior renovations, floor covering and painting for $115,000. This was actually something that was deferred pretty late last year in the budget cycle once COVID hit. I know we weighed in and said we didn't think it was urgent, so it kind of carried to this year. Are there any other discussions or comments here?
Well, it was deferred because John Parent wanted it deferred because he and the library agreed that they wanted to go ahead and get the roof done first so that they wouldn't hurt this work. So they wanted to get that done, then put the new carpet, et cetera, in so that the roof work wouldn't damage the new stuff.
Okay. Any questions on that one? All right, the last item is Quarterville Hall. So there are two relevant updates here. First, we had agreed at the last meeting that I'd reach out to Council on Aging as well, just because of the uncertainty around this project, given construction timetable, not lack of support. I did have a conversation with Mr. Harrington, who also relayed the conversation to a broader board meeting that they had last week. And the relevant update is twofold. One, as you know from my earlier update, the School Research Subcommittee continues its work. We're obviously in the infancy of our work. What I expressed to Mr. Harrington, at least my personal view, is that to support this article now and to do work on Quarterville Hall before we know the fate of the school, it doesn't make sense, right? We kind of need to know what's happening with the school, in particular if Woodward is in play, to create this kind of what I'll call domino effect. And we'll know at least where it's trending well before town meeting, right? We won't have a final decision probably, but we at least have general trending. But in addition, I asked Mark and John to reach out to Assabet to say, if we said we're not waiting on the school decision, this is a priority of the town, we need to get it done, and we're invested in Quarterville Hall for the long term. Remember, we can only spend $325K before tripping the ADA requirements, which would trip a whole, much larger project and a much more comprehensive scope. What Assabet had originally come back with was they were not able to start until the fall of 2022. They have subsequently come back and said it's at the earliest fall of 2023. So when I talked to Bill, in full disclosure, I told him the earliest Assabet can start was fall of 2022. Since that, we have learned it's now fall of 2023 for that to happen. So I think there's a few things we need to agree on here tonight. And the one thing I did commit to Bill in COA, given that they had come before us and there was a general level of support for their project, is obviously facts and circumstances change here as we get closer to town meeting. We can certainly leave this open for further conversation with BOS and advisory. But in the interest of trying to lock down general sense of where we were headed, I had a few thoughts. One, that school comment I made earlier, but two, we're not going to go out and bid the work that at least COA wants. We had always intended on Assabet doing that. And that's built into the price. We wouldn't be able to accomplish everything that COA is looking to do, plus everything John's looking to do from a siding perspective with $325,000. We need Assabet's a key part of this puzzle. So we can either just defer it, but keep it kind of open for further conversation with COA and BOS and advisory if some fact massively changes that we don't know tonight. Or what we can do is we can potentially separate this and deal with the siding now and start the clock on kind of that 3-year window for that while we wait to figure out kind of the future of the rest of the building, where ultimately COA will land from a space perspective. Because I think the one common goal that Bill and I shared, at least the conversation, I see him in the audience and he's welcome to come in here if you have any comments, Bill, but we want to design the space right the first time and get the ideal space for the seniors. And while it's very frustrating to not be able to achieve it now, and obviously the senior center is going to be coming close to a year of being closed essentially to inside programs, we obviously want them to have a robust environment to go back to when obviously the environment allows. So I'm struggling with this one a little bit because I think we all are to an extent. Is there's a clear need. There's an ability to fund it, but we may be paying for something now that may be useless to us later because we may have a better option, both in terms of the schools and in terms of how we conduct the project. And I don't know if this committee has candidly decided the fate longer term of Quarterville Hall, if we do have extra space available to us at a school or other buildings. So that's my long lead in. Welcome any thoughts from the committee on where we want to go with this, but there's obviously a bunch of different aspects to it.
Jason, are you separating the siding because Assabet wouldn't be doing the siding? Is that what you're getting at?
John, what's your thought on that?
Originally, it was going to be Assabet would do construction and we would have a separate siding project. Otherwise, we'd go over a threshold mark. But what we have to keep in mind now is that we're adding another bathroom in the hallway. We can therefore probably reduce the size of the Assabet project to maybe just the front room and siding, and we could potentially squeak by a threshold. Because remember, the back bathrooms originally were supposed to be 6 bathrooms off the back. By adding the one in the hallway, we meet the capacity of the load of the building easily. And you're going to have an ADA compliant bathroom. And you have to also keep in mind, right now that's 2 in the hallway, 1 in the office, and 1 in Cindy's. That's 4 bathrooms on the first floor, which is very adequate during the day when we're open. It works. So if the project was to be shifted to the new front room, we may be able to have Assabet do that plus the siding. But the caveat to that is if we were to hold off the siding, I've got to have my team go out there and do some sort of work. We need to patch up some stuff. There's a couple spots they're going to need to be painted of some sort to get us through that point. I don't like pushing things to a limit, but I see where you guys are coming from right now. I know you need to come up with answers, and frankly, I don't like to waste money. Anyone that knows me knows that. So I mean, we can probably, I hate using the term duct tape, but we can duct tape for a little bit as long as we know there's an answer coming down the road.
So John, what's the siding estimate if the committee did want to separate these 2 projects?
I believe it was $175 for the siding.
Yeah,
So
John,
go ahead, Andrew.
is it wise to, I mean, as far as my very limited construction knowledge, siding is usually the last thing. So it's
That's
strange to
the
do
other point,
siding,
Andrew.
then to do addition, and then you'd have to redo the siding and match it up and hope it matches. Is that wise?
You hit it on the head. You're going to have to cut open your brand new siding.
But again, the reason we're trying to separate the siding from everything else is because of the need to do something to the siding, and we can't wait 3 years for Assabet to do it. Is that why we're trying to separate siding?
Originally, it was because costs, so we didn't go over threshold. If we did the
Okay.
siding, you couldn't do the front and the back. But,
Okay.
you know, we came up with an alternate plan for a bathroom that looks like it's going to work quite well.
Yeah. So Jason, I'm in favor of just deferring it until Assabet's ready. And then John, do you have enough in your maintenance fund to handle that siding work?
Again, where it's going to be basically patching and painting over the next year, we'll make it work.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those things. It's not going to be brand new siding, folks. We will hold it together. We will paint up some spots. We got a couple of corners around the back that are in desperate need. And if we're not going to do this now, luckily, I've got a couple really good carpenters right now. So, you know, and I'm sure they would love nothing more than to try to fix up something like that. So that actually works in our benefit right now.
So can you stay on Assabet's list even if the town hasn't officially approved the project in its funding? Can we stay on that fall 23 list at least from now until we
From
see how
what I
this
can
all?
tell, Kathy, there's no official air quote list. It's like they know who's coming down the road. When I was speaking with them the other day, I believe it was Shrewsbury and Northborough have projects that were in front of us. And because of COVID, they got bumped out. And they're not even sure if they're going to let the kids out next year from what he said. You know, everything's still up in the air. So, you know, again, 23 is looking like the earliest you're starting something like this if no one else backs out of their situations.
Jason, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I guess, John, if you're telling us, A, we don't know what the future's going to hold with Assabet for one thing, and B, you could patch it together for at least another year, I guess we could leave it and reconsider it next year. But I think if you find as they're going through and they're doing the patching, it's significantly worse than you would
I
anticipate.
would come back to you.
Okay.
At that point, you know, it's one of those situations. If I see something where you're going to end up with a bad situation, we come back to you, advisory or reserve fund. Someone's going to have to step up to the plate at that point. Then.
Yeah, but no one's gonna have like even the reserve fund's not gonna be enough to cover the siding, John, right?
It's a big number.
So let me propose this, and I'll put it in a motion if everyone seems to be agreeable. My thought is we defer this, but we don't defer it to the next fiscal year. We come back and discuss it in January once we see if there's any news on the schools and where that's headed, because then we can have a more substantive conversation around if the school may be a reality for Council on Aging in the senior center in general, then what would the use be of Quarterville moving forward? Is it office space? Is it something else? Is it repurposed? Do we dispose? Like, I think there's a myriad of options that we haven't discussed. So I was thinking that's like the middle ground. So we don't push something off a year just to push it off a year, but we're clearly not ready to support this tonight for a lot of reasons. Is that generally the direction everyone's moving?
Yeah, but I would, since Bill is in the audience, I at least want to make sure it's clear that there is general support to do something to improve the seniors' facilities one way or another. And I had thought there was a dire need for another bathroom, but it sounds like John is saying that there's not.
Well, we approved one at town meeting last year, Kathy. So there's gonna be two as opposed to one. John's doing that network now.
Okay, so, all right, remind me of that. So he's already doing a bathroom.
Yes, it's already funded. So
Okay.
Bill, if you
Now
want to speak.
now I feel better. Sorry, I should have, you're, okay, sorry, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So Bill, if you want to speak, raise your hand. Otherwise, we're probably going to motion moving forward on that. And I think our support candidly is shown by not just deferring it a year, right? And keeping, and obviously BOS will weigh in and advisory will weigh in too if they think we've, but I think this keeps the possibility open. I don't want to do that with anything else, to be completely honest with you. Otherwise, we're not here to make decisions. So, Bill, I don't see you raising your hand. So I'm going to move forward. So I am going to move that the committee postpone a decision on any enhancements or improvements to Quarterville Hall until January of 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Lisa. Is there any further discussion? All right, we need a roll call on that. So Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
sorry, Jeff, Hark,
Aye.
Andrew, Pfaff. Andrew, I saw your mouth move, but I didn't hear anything.
Aye.
There you go. And Malinowski, aye. So that passes unanimously. I'm then going to group library interior renovations and bathroom renovations for the townhouse. Are there any objections or anyone want to split those? So I'm going to move that we support the library interior renovations of $115,000 and the townhouse bathroom and interior renovations of $80,000 for the FY22 capital budget. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Andrew. Any further conversation? Roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. I'm going to move that we remove the installation of the emergency generator from the FY22 capital plan, support the facilities director in replacing that with a grant opportunity, and also move that the chair send a note to the BOS recommending disposal of the current generator as surplus property. There's a second.
Second.
Did I accurately capture the conversation?
I think that was good.
Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. I'm going to move that we group the townhouse windows and exterior renovation work and support the CPC application for $2.2 million. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation?
I would just, Jason, amend it to the exact dollar amount that's on the CPC application. It's like 2.273, I don't know, whatever, it's got some.
All right, so I'm going to withdraw my motion. And Andrew, make the motion when you have that exact number up.
Hold on a second. John, do you know the exact number off the top of your head?
I'm gonna do the same thing you're doing right now. I'm gonna try to pull it up on the
The
computer.
race.
There it is, right here. Okay. hold on.
$1.2 million. $2.2 million, isn't it?
Okay, so I move that we combine the two CPA townhouse articles together for $2.238284 million.
Is there a second?
2238 what?
2238284.
So a
Second.
motion, is there a second? Second by Lisa. Any further conversation? Thanks for that, Andrew.
Oh.
All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Aye.
Pfaff, and Malinowski is aye. All right. I will move that we support $100,000 for facilities maintenance for FY22, subject to further conversations with BOS and advisory on whether this should be carried as a budget article or a capital item.
Second.
Is there a second? I heard Lisa. Any further conversation? All right. Roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
John, you are released unless you have anything else for us.
Nope, that's all. That's all. Hey,
John,
all right.
thank you
great
very
work
much.
again
Have a
on the
great night.
townhouse. That was great.
What's that?
Great work again on the townhouse application.
Thank you. Everyone have a
Good
great
job.
night.
Take care,
Aye.
John.
Thank you. All right, Chief. Thanks for your patience and your early participation. The reason I asked the chief to join us tonight was mainly around the ambulance. I'm going to leave that at the end. So do you guys want me to just go one by one through the items and I'll just see if there's any holds or further discussion? I think we've been through a lot of these. So chief vehicle car 20 for 60,000. Any questions?
I think my only question isn't really for Chief Achilles, but Jason, I mentioned it to you, is whether or not the Explorer that is currently in service could be utilized as maybe a detective vehicle or something else for the police or something. Get rid of one of those 122, 130,000 mile vehicles, but I don't think Chief Paulus is here, so.
Yeah, so I guess, Chief, do you have any plans in your department for what will happen with the surplus vehicle? Or is it surplus in your opinion, in your department?
It's surplus unless there's some specific need. I prefer it stay in the town, but unless there's no need in the town, I would surplus it.
Okay, so the fire department does not need it, but you don't think there's value to selling it. It's better.
There may be some little trade-in value if that was the case, but I think that there may be other opportunities.
Okay, so Mark and Brian, to that point, how do you typically determine, in this instance where a department's essentially potentially getting rid of a vehicle, how you would repurpose, or is there an opportunity for us to discuss further with Chief Paulus? I know Mr. Parent's vehicle is on his last legs and he typically inherits a cruiser. What are your thoughts there on how we advance that item? It may not be tonight, but just to be responsive to Andrew's question.
Sure. I mean, a lot of times it's pretty easy because we're buying new and trading in the old, which offsets part of the cost of the new. In this particular case, and it's normally coming from police and not fire, you would have them surplus a vehicle and it would, usually go to building. And again, John has a very old hand-me-down, but it's not causing too many problems right now. But I think that, that would be the natural progression in my mind for this vehicle, because you'd be significantly upgrading what facilities has. And, we'd probably get a lot, there's still a lot of life that facilities could get out of that vehicle.
All right.
So I think that's something we should further discuss, is how this committee wants to weigh into those sorts of decisions in the future. I know we talked a lot about the building inspector vehicle in past conversations and how that came about. So I think that's a chance for us to weigh in, assuming that this gets through town meeting, right? Because there's going to be a procurement cycle too after that. The next item is the light tower / generator unit. This is still on here, but the chief did inform me last week that he plans to remove it. Chief, nothing's changed in that, right?
That's correct.
So the vote when we get there will be to remove it from the capital plan. Chief, do you want us to carry that in a future year, or you just think it's being removed altogether?
Working with Lieutenant Spazey, that is an older one that has an oil leak. It's the one that gets used at the transfer station over the winter by DPW for lighting. The thought is just to let it work out its useful life, either with us or with DPW. We don't see the need of carrying two of them right now, out in the out years. So I would just remove it altogether.
Okay. Any questions on that? There's two self-contained breathing apparatus items. Both are staying in for now. One is 10,000 for repairs, Chief, is my understanding, to existing units to keep them compliant until we can actually procure the required SCB in the out year. A lot of this is timing based on grant funding, right? So if we don't get the grant, we're gonna have to do this. If we do get the grant and the timing works out, this may come off, but it needs to stay on for now, is my understanding.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to skip the thermal imaging cameras for a second while we're on SCBA. We also have the grant match in here. So if we are awarded the grant in the next cycle, I don't think the current cycle is closed yet. either, Chief, even though they said it would be done in September. So yeah, fingers crossed. So this again should stay on until we know the status of the current year grant. And obviously, if we're not successful this year for whatever reason, hopeful that this will match a grant next year when it really hasn't reached its 10-year life expectancy. Is there any questions on either of the SCBA items? Thermal imaging cameras for 30,000. Any questions on that? Chief, is that 2 cameras?
Yes, that's to replace existing.
Okay. Any questions on IV pumps? Any question on fire hose nozzle replacement? Any question on fire PPE? Remember, this is the establishment of a funding mechanism that we would deposit funds each year into a fund that would allow the chief to purchase the PPE for the personnel that need it, as opposed to forcing a schedule and replacing gear early, but with the ultimate goal of creating 2 sets of gear for each personnel that have about gear lasts 10 years, but they'd have a new set of gear about every 5 years, which is fairly standard in the fire service now, or it's what we're trying to get to. So I think this would be a 2-part recommendation in the BOS, is it's not only funding this in year 1, but it's also going to be sponsoring an article to create this fund at town meeting and what the requirements would be around it.
Okay, so just to be clear, what is the fund amount going to be?
We're going to put 40,000. The recommendation is to put 40,000 in year 1, which would fund about 10 sets of gear.
Okay, so to sponsor a warrant article, that's going to be funded with $40,000 to be able to do this when it's appropriate.
Correct. And in that way it would roll. So if the chief only needs to replace 8 sets of gear next year, it's there. As opposed to he can't necessarily always control turnover, damage to gear, et cetera.
In the PPE, what is that specifically going to cover? Is it going to cover any of the other items that we're buying, like the imaging cameras or any of the other items that we're looking at?
Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, this is dedicated to the structural firefighting gear. So the structural firefighting ensemble, the trousers, the coat, helmet, boots, and gloves, and protective hoods. And we projected out based on our replacement schedule to start next year. And Jason's correct, is that the goal is not to get everyone on the same schedule, because that is a big hit to the budget and it causes some issues. So this allows us to kind of extend some life with some other gear.
How much other equipment needs to be regularly recycled, like the PPE?
I think I provided the committee a capital replacement guidelines that we're using based on either a standard or benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
So it ranges from fire apparatus to radios. So I'd refer to that. If you have a specific question, I can go over each one.
No, I'm sort of looking how much of these reoccurring budget items can we sort of lump into one sort of line item in the future, where we have a certain amount that we're going to have to have every year that will cover all those items, just for management's sake.
I think that's a challenge because they all have different life cycles and standards they follow. I think if we keep them within the group that they belong, it would be cleaner for both the capital, the BOS, and advisory to know what they're going to, instead of just a lump sum. Because some are protective equipment, some are medical equipment, some are vehicles.
Yes, no, I understand that, and I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm just thinking, when we're looking at it from a macro environment sake, they would all fall into that category of needing reoccurring replacement. That's all I'm looking at, and so therefore you're going to have to pay for them. So you might as well have them all lumped in together as a schedule.
Are there any questions on what was on the capital plan for fire?
Jason, one general question that, is a lot of the fire items would qualify as equipment leasing or municipal leasing. So whether or not we wanted to package these up into an equipment line and purchase them that way versus putting them as a straight cash dollar capital purchase is, if we wanted to look at that. But I'm fine with the actual, getting the equipment, but whether and how we facilitate the payment, just wondering whether
I
or
think
not.
if we look, I guess my only reservation on that, Andrew, would be we have the money in theory in FY22 to capture these, and we have much bigger capital items coming forward, not only from this department, but many others in the next couple of years, so that if we do spread the cost beyond this year, we're potentially jeopardizing some of the needs in future years versus I think where we're going to land here is right within where we need to be to kind of help support what I'll call a healthy tax rate, stabilization from a capital perspective. It's still going to put pressure on the operations. That's
Yeah.
for sure. And obviously none of us can project where the revenue side's going, but I think maybe that's a lever we don't have to decide on that per se right now, but that's a lever I think we continue to examine and use only as a tool if something goes sideways with state funding or something comes up in the operational budget as the town works through that requires us to look at things differently. But
Start getting
these
close to
numbers,
levy capacity, then maybe it's something we would look at.
or just a tax rate increase that's unpalatable to people.
Yeah, but this is only $125,000 in total. I wasn't going to bring this up now. I think it's more of an advisory discussion, but there's also some money that comes in every year from the Harvard Bookstore that I think should be used for this stuff first. We'll talk about that later. So I just don't think it's worth talking about leasing $125,000 worth of stuff. I think we have to get much bigger before we start talking about that. And you just compare what's the difference between financing with a bond, financing with a lease. They're both ways to finance. I just think this is too small to talk about financing.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at, basically all the stuff that we have in here with the hook truck and the police cruisers and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's all together $740K.
Well, if you're adding that in, I wouldn't add that. I'm talking about the group from line 28 to 33. So if you're adding the whole thing in.
Yeah. Do you bond? I mean, those are in here as non-bonded items. Would you either A, bond them, or B, look for a equipment line? But that's more of an advisory conversation.
Yeah. So I think we decide tonight that we're going to do this, and then we just talk about later whether there's a better way to pay for these than what we've got over in column D.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to separate this into two motions. The first one's going to be pursuant to the recommendation of Chief Achilles, we remove the light tower / generator unit EM2 from the capital plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Andrew. Any further conversation? Roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
I
Park,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. And then I'm planning to bundle everything else that we've discussed thus far on fire into one, unless someone wants to separate any.
I would say the only comment on it is on the chief's vehicle, that we do everything we can to either A, get good trade-in value for that vehicle, repurpose it somewhere else, and take at least one vehicle off the roll. So if that goes to John and then John's vehicle gets, surplus, great, but we should be looking to take one vehicle off the town roll.
So basically for a net zero impact on the total vehicles in town.
Correct, but a net increase in the total cost.
Yeah. Okay. Are you comfortable if that's noted in the minutes and not in a motion?
Yeah, that's fine. And John and Mark and Brian are here to hear that too. So.
Okay. So I'm going to move that we recommend support for all of the fire capital items for FY22 and also recommend the creation of a fire personal protective equipment fund for turnout gear and associated equipment.
Second.
Is there any further conversation? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
I
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Brings us to the ambulance. So full disclosure, Chief Achilles did not raise this with me. I kind of went to him and asked a question, which led to some of this. And the reason I asked the question was I was comparing the capital plan we had got to other documentation that I had seen on the fire department for many years in terms of replacement schedules, et cetera. And I noticed that the ambulance, which was scheduled as an FY22 item, was showing as FY23. And what it did is it created an inconsistent replacement schedule that we're now going to be off cycle when this ambulance gets replaced. If we just keep this in if we keep it in the FY23 recommendation, as opposed to pulling it forward to FY22. And the main reason it was pushed back was just capacity in the ambulance fund to fund it, right? Because of some of the expenditures that had occurred out of that fund previously, even with additional revenue. And I point to two main drivers. One is the pumper that was purchased a few years ago was only bonded over 5 years. So there's 100K plus debt payments on that every year versus the pumper that we authorized at the town meeting last year. I think Brian is anticipating more of a 15-year bonding cycle. So it's going to take it's going to be a much lower amount, and especially when you think about where the interest rates are. So I approached it, and this is just candidly from my background, that this is one of the only revenue generating assets in this town. Anytime an ambulance is down, we're relying on mutual aid, and that money doesn't come back to us. It goes to whatever mutual aid ambulance comes in. And when you think about what this asset does for the town, not only is it revenue generating, but it's probably one of the few assets you need, ASAP, and you don't have the luxury of waiting for. And things break, just like our cars break, et cetera. There are times when ambulances are down, and having the backup ambulance be, newer and not on its last leg, I think is also important. So I could go either way here, but I think it was important that we also look ahead at what's coming. And when I looked ahead, this seemed like something that we should at least discuss. I think if we did move forward with it as an FY22 recommendation, the conversation I've had with the chief is he wouldn't necessarily go order it July 1st of 2021. There would be, subject to consultation, especially with Brian, to make sure that depending on the delivery date, et cetera, that we actually did have the funds in the ambulance funds, and this wasn't going to necessarily impact the general fund, and that the timing could be arranged in such a way. But much like the pumper, there is a lead time. So, Chief, before I open it to the committee, I don't know, based on the conversation we had that ultimately led to it coming to this agenda, if you have anything you want to add, but I thought it was important to give that background.
No, I think you hit it on the head. I think if you look at we've been publishing our statistics over the last year, and they're the busier pieces. They go on every single call. We've done a lot internally to start rotating them to take some pressure off the primary ambulance. A couple of years ago, they would run the first ambulance into the ground because it was the busiest ambulance. Internally, the members came up with a rotation. So if you ever look at our monthly stats, you see like one ambulance gets a lot more calls than the other because we're doing that. We are starting to have some minor issues with the older ambulance. And I think it's important that right now, if we were to place it in FY22, it'd be 7.5 years old. And we're trying to do a 7 to 8 year replacement. If we replace it in 23, it'd be 8.5 years old. We are now starting to exceed its lifespan. So I would like to see it moved up, understanding that there are some pressures on the upcoming budgets. I agree that to work with Brian, what's a good place to try to put it out so it doesn't impact it the whole year. It's about a 6-month lead time once you place the order to get that. So I would support moving it up, and I said that to Jason earlier. I also feel it is a revenue generating, and it without a consistent backup ambulance, there is the impact on our ambulance fund.
So look for reaction, comments, questions.
So let me at least make the point that I don't think it matters whether there's money in the ambulance fund to fund this or not. I mean, look at what Jason just said. We're already using the ambulance fund to fund other things like fire trucks. So I just don't think it's relevant what's in that account. I think it's much more relevant what we need to do. I mean, not to be facetious, do you want an ambulance to break down on the way to a hospital? We use ambulances a lot in this town, a lot more than fire trucks. So I would think we want to replace this when it's needs to be replaced, not because we think the ambulance fund needs another year to put more money into it. And I don't think it's going to make much difference whether it's fiscal year 22 or 23 from what I'm looking at. So given what Jason and the chief had just said, it sounds like we need this in fiscal year 22.
Yeah, I agree.
Chief.
Kathy, I 100% agree with what you're saying. I'm just gonna be a little aggressive on this in that I think there's gonna be a way to fund it through the ambulance fund. So I think we're gonna be able to accomplish both goals, but I appreciate your comments there.
Chief, would we have the capacity or the usage to have 3 ambulances?
We're starting to look at that model. I think it's a little premature right now. I think we're completing a community risk assessment and a standard cover deployment model project right now. I think that will start leading us down the road. But replacing this now does set us up that if in 3 years, the 2018 ambulance, it could be one of those things that we consider. These are challenges because everybody around us is busy with the ambulance. We go mutual aid quite a bit. Every so often we get mutual aid in. So in our region, there's not a lot of capacity for reserve ambulances, so this may work. I just think it's maybe a little premature to say we'd keep it now.
Okay. Yeah, I think Jason, when I was looking at the ambulance fund spreadsheet, I think it was just, we weren't bonding it. It was just cash. So if we bond it, I think we'll be okay there, which we probably should be looking to do anyway.
Yeah, plus I think what Brian's planning to do with the engine, with the pumper that's already been authorized, I think that number is going to come way down based on a longer bonding period. Plus, Brian, I don't know what interest rate you were using back at town meeting versus now, but I got to imagine you're using a lower rate based on recent experience.
Yeah, I used a 3% on these estimates, which probably, if we were doing it today, is probably a little high actually, but I think that's conservative.
It's definitely conservative.
All right, so
Right, Andrew?
1.
yeah,
I agree. I think it is one. One is
just
one.
bonded a building for
Maybe
something
90 bips, something like that, probably.
All right, so I'm sensing general support to accelerate this to FY22. Any further discussion you want to have? So I'm going to move the committee support moving the replacement ambulance of $275,000 from FY20. Sorry, I heard an echo, but from FY23 forward to FY22. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further conversation? All right, roll call, Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Chief, any parting words?
I appreciate the continued support of the fire department. Goes a long way for everybody, I think. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night, Chief.
Good night,
Good
Chief.
night, everybody.
Aye.
All right. I think we're going to move a little quicker here because most of the other departments don't have as much. I'm going to go to MIS next because I see Tom is still here. Server and storage infrastructure upgrade. We previously talked about this. This is at $90,000. I think it started at a smaller number, but Tom upped it based on latest estimates. He's going to continue to keep looking at it between now and town meeting in case the opportunity exists to lower it a little bit, but this is definitely a conservative placeholder. So I guess any questions you want me to pull Tom in for?
My only question was if our decision on the generator might change any factors in his decisions.
I'm surprised no one asked where the server resides. It's not at the Townhouse. It's at Quarterville Hall.
Well, there's also significant at public safety.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming
but it's not at Townhouse. That's my point.
I guess Tom L. I'm assuming that's Tom LaFlame. Can you just raise your hand if that's really you? I just want to make sure it's not. Made it an assumption. All right, there we go. Tom, I'm bringing you in as a panelist. So Tom, the question was around the servers and whether there's any impact on the townhouse and the generator.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, there is none. As Kathy pointed out, we have virtually no servers at the townhouse. The only thing we have there is a little bit of phone equipment that runs the main lines. All the other infrastructure is at public safety in the brand new server room.
Are there any other questions for Tom on this?
So Tom, do you just what's the basic, purpose of this? Just to have more bandwidth? Is this kind of having to do with some kind of vulnerability or?
Yeah, so really, I inherited a server environment that the contractors had, over the years replaced a single server at a time. And all the servers they're all virtualized, but they have what's called direct attached storage. So each physical box has its own hard drive or set of hard drives. So all the virtual machines on those servers rely on that storage. This will bring all the physical servers into the same model. They'll be compatible with each other, and they'll also be a shared storage environment. So that will allow for better maintenance, better reliability going forward. And some of the servers are starting to get up there in age. I believe, and I could look at my inventory, but I believe we're getting to 5-6 years on a couple of the physical boxes. So it's getting past useful life on those.
Is there any cloud backup kind of functionality?
Yeah. Actually, you should ask that. I just completed a project to upgrade our backup solution to have both local storage and cloud storage. So we do have a lot better redundancy now. So if we do have a physical failure, we can call what's called spinning up a virtual server in the cloud if needed.
Yeah, I was reading some of the MVP grants, and City of Irving or Town of Irving did one for data redundancy.
Yeah,
with their servers in their cloud. So just thought process, maybe look at that too.
Yeah, and as we continue down the road, that is something we'll always be looking at is if any of our infrastructure makes more sense to move to the cloud or someone else to manage. But for the most part, where we are right now is, I think, where we'll be for a while.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tom? All right, I'll move that we support the server and storage infrastructure upgrade for $90,000 for the FY22 capital plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Andrew. Any further conversation? Seeing none. Braccio?
Aye.
Cook?
Aye.
Hark?
Aye.
Palmer?
Aye.
Pfaff?
Aye.
And Malinowski, aye. That carries unanimously. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Good night, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
I don't know
All right.
what else's windows, but all mine go in perfect order.
Alphabetically?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say I'm the same. I'm
Alphabetically, and then you're the last one, so it goes in voting order.
Mine's not.
I'm gonna go to recreation next because I do see Tim out there. So the first is really a formality. Is they're not moving forward with the Finn Field design. We've never talked about that, but it was sitting on the FY22 capital plan that we inherited. So unless there's any objection, I'm just going to move that we push that out to FY23 for further consideration once recreation is ready. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further conversation?
Well,
All right.
I'd like to see the total field plan revisited at some point because it was torn apart at one of the annual meetings, and I'd like to see recreation bring the whole thing back as a package and, put some sort of bond issue out there and amortize the whole thing out.
I think that's the plan. I think that will go nicely with committee assignments coming up. So I think there's one member that really is interested in that. Maybe two based on that comment. All right, so we have a motion. We have a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, roll call. Braccio.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
And Malinowski, aye. So that's unanimous. The other I view as more of a formality, but happy to take the discussion in any way, is they had submitted a CPA application last year. It had been approved by CPA, but it was one of the articles that was pulled for purposes of the annual town meeting, not because no one supported it, but because they were trying to streamline town meeting and basically make the town meeting go as quick as possible. So this just rolled over this year as an article that would continue to be capital in nature, and I assume still has CPA support. So I think it's more of a formality that obviously we have questions on the project. I'll bring Tim in here, but it's more supporting the concept of looking at Calander, which I know was one of the items, Joe, at a prior town meeting that had a lot of objection.
And I think Kathy Lee said this was supported by both advisory and the selectmen, right?
And there was no dissent that you remember, correct?
I don't think so.
No, the dissent was the previous year, so we think we got through it. We think they've analyzed it right. They think they can fix it, truly fix it. They've gotten through the issues with the neighbors. So I think we're where we need to be.
Yeah, same
Okay.
from the Board of Selectmen, Jason. It was unanimous.
Okay. So Tim, you can kind of see where the committee's going, but if you want to add anything or react to Joe's comment, I'm happy to bring you in. Otherwise, I'm going to make a motion. Just raise your hand if you want to come in. All right. No hand raised. So I will move that we support Calander Fields for $238,750, consistent with the CPA and CPA approval from last year. Is there a second?
Second.
Got any further conversation? All right. Roll call. Braccio.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. And Tim's all set. So congrats, Tim. We look forward to the broader plan. All right. So I'm going to kind of work. I think we have police, DPW, and then I'll get to schools in a second. So
One thing when I was looking at I think we also pushed off the CPA warrant article for St. Mark's. So I don't know if that's been pulled. Did they pull that application?
Yeah, but that's not town property, Andrew.
yeah, that's why it's not on here.
Oh, because not. Okay.
Andrew, initially I wondered the same thing. And then I realized it wasn't town property, so.
That makes sense.
You can voice, obviously, there's a lot of voices that will be heard still on that one.
Yeah.
So let's do police. So here there's a new item that the chief asked for consideration by the committee. He realized his defibrillators are beyond their useful life in the cruisers. So he's recommending that we support replacement of those for $18,200. So thought we'd talk about that one first, and then we can go back up to the cruisers that were already sitting in the capital plan.
What's AED stand for?
Automatic external defibrillator. Sorry, that I should spell that out. That's on the drafter of the spreadsheet.
If we're willing to move up the ambulance, we should be paying for these. If they're expired already and they need a replacement, let's just do it.
Yep, I agree. I would say, Kathy, this would be a perfect Harvard fund.
I agree.
So, while I agree with that statement, the question is, do we want to bring it to town meeting floor? Because Harvard Fund doesn't go to town meeting floor.
No, again, we're talking about how to finance it. I think that we should approve all this. I don't think that money should be spent on those funds without our approving it. So no, we definitely should approve this and talk about how to finance it later.
Okay, because candidly, right, if they may not want to wait, maybe shouldn't be waiting till spring of 2021. I don't know. I mean, those things sit in cold vehicles too. They're not in a heated garage. They sit in the cruisers. They don't necessarily. So, but I'm sensing support. Go ahead, Lisa. Was that you?
Just quickly. So based on what you just said, even, looking to 2022, for replacement of these, is this something we should be looking at sooner and finding a way to fund it sooner?
Well, so assuming we support the concept, which I've heard no objection to, I've heard nothing but support. If we approve this now and it goes before general fund authorization at town meeting, it'd be July 1 of 2021 when the chief could actually place the order.
And what's the time frame, the lead frame on that? Do we know?
You can go buy them tomorrow.
Can you? Okay.
Oh yeah. You could order yourself one on Amazon today.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that they don't carry the type that Chief Achilles carries on the ambulance. They're the kind you find on the wall in buildings and stuff like that.
Okay.
He's got $28,000 in the Harvard Fund at the end of fiscal year, so you can do it right now with that money.
So, Kathy, do you want the motion to include that I go back to Chief Paulus and ask him if these are in need of immediate replacement and to contemplate Harvard funds?
Yeah. I think if it needed to be done immediately, a Harvard fund or, revolving fund, Kathy? I don't know, but waiting. Is that safe to wait?
I think Harvard Fund is a perfect place for this to come from. That's what that fund is for. That fund, Harvard writes checks for fire and police equal amounts, and it has to be spent on those two departments. No, nothing else. It's restricted. So,
Jason, my only concern was even bringing it up was that, knowing that we've now just said, on a Zoom meeting that they're at the end of their shelf life and they need to be replaced sooner rather than later. I would hate tomorrow or a month from now for a cruiser to go out and need the defibrillator and it not work.
Let me find.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think Chief, let me just find if he actually listed, just to make sure it's clear. So while I look for that, I'm going to move that we support the purchase of replacement AEDs for the police department for $18,200. Is there a second?
Second.
In my purpose of keeping the motion brief is I think the minutes should denote the conversation around Harvard funds. And if someone wants a separate motion to ask me to go back to the chief tomorrow on that, I'm happy to entertain it. Otherwise, I feel like we can accomplish it in the minutes themselves.
I'm fine with that. Unless Andrew or Kathy feel differently. Okay.
So just full disclosure, when he submitted this request, he said the units were purchased in 2008 and he estimates they have a 10-year lifespan.
Do they have an actual expiration date? Do you know?
Only the pads within them do.
Okay.
In the batteries. So as long as they've been maintaining them, then I think that's the key of how you maintain those devices. But I think the message is pretty clear from this committee. All right, so we have a motion. It's been made. It's been seconded. Roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. We come back to cruisers. So I have a number highlighted in here of 109,464. I'll be completely honest, the chief has sent me 4 different numbers in the last 5 days because he keeps getting revised pricing and he's really trying to get it precise. Where I left it with him, because I said I don't want another quote tomorrow that conflicts with our vote tonight, was that we would authorize, I would at least seek an authorization from the committee of 115 to deal with fluctuations and stuff like this. We're basically supporting the concept of 2 cruisers. But I think the other important thing to note, in the reason why his items keep changing, is he's thinking of moving his Explorers to hybrids, which we would hopefully see a corresponding change in fuel. I get gasoline is not that expensive right now, but we may be in an environment down the road during the useful life of the vehicle where it would be. So he'd be moving to more of a hybrid with the Explorer. And he's also exploring, based on feedback from his department, potentially having one charger as opposed to an Explorer. There is a cost difference to that. It's actually cheaper for a charger versus an Explorer, but we're also in New England, so chargers versus Explorers right on. So he would never have a fleet of all chargers, is I guess how I understood it. But he is also, there is a, everyone has their own different driving styles, much like one of you may have an SUV, one of you may have a sedan. We all have different styles. So I think that's the prudent way, is to put a placeholder of 115. I'm happy to even go to 110. I think it's cutting it close because we don't know what's going to happen with vehicle inventory, et cetera. So I think we need to support an amount, and we need to support the concept of 2 cruisers, in that based on the inventory that he had previously provided, that made sense.
It's always going to be 2 or 1 every year. It always has been for years and years. So I think 2 is right. And I would say just do a not to exceed 115 to be safe.
Okay.
Yeah, my only is, the chief's vehicle for expedition, all souped up, was 60, right? And seems expensive for a police cruiser, but.
So you're saying Chief Achilles' vehicle was 60
Correct.
versus Chief Paulus's vehicle last year was approximately 40. So the difference
He's saying the
between,
cruisers look expensive compared to what
Correct.
all is probably
We're
in.
approving 115. It's pretty much like getting 2 of Chief Achilles' chief vehicles
yeah, but if you think about what goes into a police cruiser,
versus
in
what
terms
goes into a command vehicle.
excuse me, sorry, I didn't hear it.
Sorry, as opposed to what goes into a chief command vehicle.
Yeah, well, I think a cruiser, right, you're looking at light package, and you're looking at all the electronics that support it, including laptop mounts, et cetera. And then you're looking at obviously all the caging and bars and stuff that adds up, versus the chief's vehicle is a standard vehicle, but he's buying a Tahoe, not an Explorer. So naturally it's just a larger vehicle, but also the chief's vehicle, the cost is in the trunk, right? In terms of all the equipment in the setup he would have. So it's personal, just from experience, I think it's apples to oranges. A police cruiser to a fire command vehicle. I think the more comparable is the chief, who basically has a regular Explorer with no package, was $40K this year, right? It just has lights, versus a fully marked cruiser with all the things to protect the officers. It's more like, seems like we're trending towards 55-ish and plus.
All right.
He has an actual quote, so I don't know how to disagree with a quote, I guess, like from the state bid list.
Do we know how much? I mean, we're splitting hairs. What the difference between a hybrid and what the regular police cruisers are?
I think it was
I think
approximately
it's $4,000 or
$5,000.
$5,000.
I was going to say approximately 5.
Okay.
All right, so I will move that we support the purchase of 2 police cruisers with the FY22 capital budget for $115,000. There's a second.
Second.
Seconded by Andrew. Is there any further conversation?
I would just say, Jason, can we put on there, it says police cruisers, can we just say two?
Yes.
Two police cruisers, just to be specific.
Any other discussion? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. We go back up to DPW. I'm going to move that based on the conversation at our last meeting, that we push the Quarterville Road project towards FY23. However, continue to encourage the DPW superintendent to support any and all grant opportunities and to bring forward any engineering requests to us to facilitate this as a shovel-ready project. There a second?
Second.
Heard a second from Jeff. Is there any discussion on that? Is that consistent with where everyone landed after Karen last week? Or a couple weeks, whenever it was, last meeting. All right, roll call then. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. I will go down very briefly on the listing, just because we did it for every other department. There's a chipper for 30,000. Any questions?
My only question there, Jason, was like we talked about before on the street sweepers, are you using that in December through, in the winter? How many hours is it used? I mean, renting a chipper and hooking up to a pickup is relatively easy to find, whether or not we're using it so much that really cost benefit is purchase versus, rent. But
I don't know the answer to that question.
I
I think that the way to answer it would be to look at how old the one is that we currently have. So I don't know if anyone wants to try to pull that up in her vehicle inventory while we go through the rest. There's an equipment trailer to replace a 2006 for 12,000. Any questions, comments on that? There's the hook lift truck split funding source. We already voted in favor of this at prior meetings. We actually wanted it to already be done, but couldn't because of logistics. There's two pickup trucks here. There's a utility service diesel that's a water specific truck. 3 large plows. And then road maintenance, which is the same as last year. Andrew, we should come back to your comment that you made previously related to the facilities. And then sidewalk maintenance, which is candidly new. But I think we heard loud and clear through some of the public outreach of the desire for that. So I guess any holds on any of those or any different views you want to take in terms of how we approach them?
You may want to separate the road maintenance from the sidewalk and the sidewalk maintenance from everything else, but if you want to. So can we but let's talk about sidewalk maintenance because it is new. So we agree that this truly is maintenance.
Yes, it's not going to be to put a new sidewalk, for example, on your street if it didn't exist.
Okay,
It would be
so
to maintain the current
maintenance
asset.
is to do what? Shovel it, repair it.
Mark, I would welcome any thoughts from you, but I would think you would word this very similar to however you word the road maintenance any year, right? In terms of repaving, resurfacing, grading. I don't know. Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, Jason. That's pretty accurate.
Did that answer your question, Kathy?
I've got more questions, but they can wait for other forums. So don't. I'm not going to ask any more questions on that.
Is this sidewalk amount going to be rolling over, or is it just going to be fixed at 200 every year?
Well, we have the ability to set it every year. So for example, the road maintenance, if you kind of were to look back through history, some years it's been 400, some years it's been 325, some years it's been 3. It's usually based on where Karen sees projects going, the ability to go out to bid as one, as opposed to on many different projects. But I think so we're looking at 200 this year, Joe, but it could be 400 next year if we think we have the ability to fund it, or we think there's a need for it.
Then, well, is this really something that goes out of an operations budget as opposed to capital? I mean, isn't this sort of like the facilities maintenance fund?
That's, I think, the item for discussion.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm there for you.
But let's clarify the difference between possibly this one and facilities and road maintenance. Road maintenance is a warrant article for a specific reason, and it should be a warrant article, unlike discussion facilities, because of the way Karen repairs roads and does contracts. So she does need to build up money to do that. So that one really is different. I don't know that she's going to do that with sidewalk maintenance, and you definitely don't do it with facilities. So I'm not sure that this needs to be a warrant article, which is not necessarily our place to decide that tonight. We just need to decide we want to do this. So I don't know.
Yeah, is this like the first installment towards a town sidewalk initiative?
Well, I think she at least when I asked her a question at some point, I don't remember when it was. I don't know if it was in a meeting or not, but she said she could spend this 200,000 like once she had it, right? So 7/1 of next year, she would go out and fix, I don't know which ones, right? Like that's the question, I think, but she could use it versus the 325. She has to build it up, like Kathy said, over many years to be able to actually go out and bid this effectively. So
And this is her number, Jason. Is this a estimate?
Yeah. And the reason, Kathy, I think you want it as a warrant article is what if the bid comes in at 190 for whatever she wants to do next year, right? I don't think we want that 10 going back into the general fund. I think we want it to be, so she has 210 maybe the next year to go towards sidewalks if that's a common goal of the town, which I think we're hearing.
Yeah, but I would say the opposite. I would say if she has stuff that she can, small enough stuff that she has 200,000, she's going to do it and she doesn't need to pool that money for over multiple years, then it's just general fund. It's just general operating budget of road maintenance or sidewalk maintenance.
Yeah, but you can't control the bid environment. It's not like she's doing it with her own people. Like John's doing most of his work with his own people. So he can
she doesn't need
control.
multiple years of funding. Right? She's not doing a, $800,000 sidewalk maintenance project and pooling it for four years and then rolling it out. She's doing smaller projects tomorrow, which to me isn't a capital item that you need to have the revolving fund and build up. It's just regular operating budget. And if she doesn't use it all, she doesn't use it all.
Don't call it a revolving fund because that means something else. It's a warrant article.
But the money revolves.
Well, actually, if I remember correctly, this actually makes some sense because she said when they do sidewalks, they really have to redo the road. So in actuality, new sidewalks would be tied to the bigger road projects as opposed to the actual maintenance. So I guess I do sort of understand why this is here.
But then I would increase the road maintenance budget to say, we have a new philosophy that when we do roads over, we're also going to add sidewalks.
Well, I thought we're not adding sidewalks with this. We are fixing sidewalks with this.
Yes. That's why Quarterville stands as its own project, because that is potentially adding sidewalks and repairing sidewalks as opposed to just repairing a sidewalk that already exists.
And we do shovel our sidewalks here, the few that we do shovel with our own people. So is this not shoveling sidewalks? This is truly fixing sidewalks?
Yeah, it better be.
All right, I'm just trying to make
Like,
sure.
that's why we have a plow budget, right? Like that's why DPW has a snow and ice budget. So again, I go back to what I said about facilities. It'd be nice to see how this stuff's being spent to be able to form a longer term view of, is 200 the right number, right? It's a starting point. Like we may find that 200 gets us a small sliver of one road and it really doesn't add a measurable impact. And we need to think about, maybe a one-time capital item for sidewalks to redo, X number of miles in town of where it is, sort of thing. So I think it's a starting point. It's probably not an end point. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and my other part is, what's the difference between sidewalk maintenance and road maintenance? Couldn't you, I mean, sidewalks part of the, I mean, are they constrained on the road maintenance article to only using it on the drivable surface and you can't use any of that funds for the sidewalks? I got to imagine when we're paving those roads, we're also working on the sidewalks.
So we talked about this at a prior meeting. Someone tell me if I'm crazy or I'm thinking about this in my head. I had them combined and the committee wanted them separate. Am I not remembering that correctly?
I want them separate because we have spent a lot of time on the road maintenance number. We've got a really nice spreadsheet to support it. We know where it came from. I've got faith in that number. 200 to me is just a guesstimate till we get a track record here going. So I don't want to see the two much together. And I don't think we've spent much of the road maintenance on sidewalk maintenance in the past. I think it has been truly asphalt, fixing potholes, et cetera, in the roads. I've never heard her say she's using that money for sidewalks.
I agree. They should be separate.
Okay. All right. So
Jason,
we want road and let me move. Sorry, Jeff, were you saying? Sorry.
I was able to track down that info on the chipper. So it was 2007 and it's got 670 miles on it.
Or hours probably, but
Yeah, hopefully it's, yeah.
right. So like 51 hours per year.
I think
I guess if I think about it, they rent it, let's just say they rent it one time a year. I don't know how much a chipper costs to rent.
Like 300.
sorry, and it also says year-round use in the spreadsheet.
But it's like the 12-inch big chippers are about $400 a day.
And it would make sense if year-round use, if you had a big storm in the winter and trees go down all over, you could potentially certainly be using it year-round.
I also don't know that, like, in an emergency, right? Like, think about an event even the other night. We don't need to be going to the rental place down the street to rent it. Like, they're not going to be open.
I went through a walk through Southborough the other night and to see the new sidewalks, and it was really late and really dark, and a big tree had come down on the new sidewalk that I had to skirt around. So it's only $30,000. If this were more money, I'd say we might want to look at, leasing when we need it, but it's only $30,000 and you don't know when you're going to need it. So I would, if it was bigger, I think we should look at it. I think it's too little to worry about leasing it versus buying it, just buy it. So they've got one when they need it.
All right. So does anyone want me to separate road and sidewalk in my motion?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to move that we support the chipper of 30,000, the equipment trailer of 12,000, the hook lift truck for a combination of 225,000, the pickup diesel for 70, the utility service diesel of 70, 3 large plows of 40,000 in the DPW capital for FY22. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Any further conversation? All right. Roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Ark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Vaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So, Andrew, you wanted to hold it. So what are you thinking? Just so we can think through whether there's consensus or not.
I know Karen, she talked a little bit about it, but to Kathy's point, like the numbers behind it, the forecasts, how much is that going to do? Do we have enough? Do we not have enough? It seems like a little bit of a finger in the air.
Well, that's not what Kathy just said. Kathy just said she had full confidence in the
road
maintenance.
In the road maintenance, but not the sidewalk maintenance.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm wondering if we want to just postpone this to ask Karen to provide more forecasted information on what that 200 would really mean and why it's not part of road, et cetera, et cetera. Is it enough?
Well,
Is it not
hang
enough?
on. We just said this committee wants them separate. So
Right.
do we need to take a vote on that? Because I'm hearing two different things.
I'm not saying we want to vote on them separately. I'm
Okay.
asking why does she currently pay for it today out of road maintenance is one. So if she
My
wants to
understanding is no.
if she just wants to fix a sidewalk and she has an asphalt guy come in and just maintenance a sidewalk, does she pay that out of that fund? If not, That means she's never maintaining those. How is she paying for them? I just want to understand how we're currently doing any sidewalk maintenance today.
Well, Andrew, if you take a look at downtown, the reason we're doing the downtown project is because the sidewalks are part of it, because look what a mess the sidewalks were. So I don't think the sidewalks were getting repaired on a regular basis. Lisa, I don't know what you think, but I think that's part of the problem. We haven't repaired the sidewalks very well.
I agree, Kathy, and no matter where you walk on what side of town, it's the same way. You know, depending on where the sidewalks are at, you're almost breaking your ankles with the holes and the broken asphalt in the sidewalks. So I think at some point we do have to start some type of maintenance. And obviously, as Jason said, this is a first step. And I think Kathy, you said that as well. So we can do nothing and the sidewalks will continue to get worse. I mean, walkability is huge in the master plan that's being done now. We're talking about it for downtown with the sidewalks. So I personally, well, I completely understand Andrew wanting more information. I think we should leave this on there and get the information. It's easier to take something off than to put something back on.
Yeah, so we can get the same detail, Andrew, with the sidewalks that we did with the road maintenance, a really detailed spreadsheet.
And I don't disagree with you, Lisa. I'm wondering if we don't have enough. I just want to postpone voting on it until we get the information and wondering if we need more than we currently have or more detail on it.
So, Mark, are you aware of anything actually existing? Because I had already asked that question. The reason I phrased it as a starting point, because I don't know that there's a formal plan in place yet, because I know there was reference to a sidewalk committee that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I don't think there's a formal plan, Jason. You are correct. There was I think a sidewalk committee, an ad hoc committee of selectmen set up a few years ago. It lasted, I think, 6 weeks. They quickly put together a list of, areas where it was adding new sidewalks that had nothing to do with maintaining the existing. And so if funding becomes available, it kind of, listed, here's the priorities of where it should be spent to add new sidewalk. So new versus maintained, it's kind of two different things.
So I'm fine holding that one, Andrew, because I think we've been unanimous thus far. There's no point in that we're going to meet again before the BOS meeting. I just am trying to set your expectations that I'm not sure what exists and what would be pulled together. But I just want to give Karen clear instructions, because if we're saying we want it to look like what advisory looked at in road maintenance, we can certainly ask for that. So
I would say at a minimum, because she said she already knows what she could use that for, if she knows that, if we could say, okay, we're going to fix the sidewalks on, I don't know, Parkerville and whatever, for the full stretch or this stretch or that kind of thing, just so we know that it's queued up and that's what we anticipated would cost. Like kind of year one, this is what we'd anticipate versus not having it for multiple years, but just some foresight into that.
Okay. I don't know that we're going to get roads because, needs change over time too, right? Like your sidewalk might be in the greatest need today, but then something happens with a storm or a water main breaks or what have you. So, all right. So then I'm going to move that we support the road maintenance for FY22 of $325,000. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right. Roll call. Braccio.
Aye.
Cook.
Aye.
Park.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Pfaff.
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. So what I will do is I will ask Karen, passes unanimously. I will ask Karen to provide us something within a week. So you have a few days to look at it, and you should individually reach out to her if anyone wants to understand further, so that we can vote on the next meeting, which we'll talk about in a second.
Perfect.
Make sense? I don't want to ruin our streak.
Well, you gotta have one or two,
Well, all right, let's talk about schools. So I promised Mr. Challen in the school committee that we would not vote on anything tonight related to schools. The main reason for that is they're going to talk about these items tomorrow in whether they're going to pull them back or not for this year, given the ongoing conversation. So I want to let them as a school committee, take their votes of where they want to go from a capital perspective. And then we will talk about it at our next meeting and take a vote then. Obviously, I'll forward any information that comes out. I'm going to try to listen to the meeting tomorrow night too. It's on their agenda under capital planning. So, but I think we owe them that to, make their recommendations, especially given how collaborative they've been with us on the other items. So any thoughts there? Any other questions? So really we'll have two more items theoretically to vote on next time, is anything the schools put forward and anything related to the sidewalk maintenance. We good to move on from FY22 capital? So item 7 was capital planning policy. I was ambitious in creating the agenda because as I started to draft it, I was like, we're not going to rush that. But what I did do is I did get from Brian the 3 essentially bullets that they're working under now from the capital policy perspective, because they used to be staff as the capital committee. We're going to essentially have to revamp it. So what I'd like the committee to think about, and I'll just put a placeholder in what I circulate for our next meeting, is like what you think the right dollar amount we should be approving, hearing some of the things we talked about tonight, and what the right minimum useful life should be. Right. And I think we'll have to agree on some sort of consensus, because that will drive whether a department head brings that forward as part of an operating budget or capital budget, which candidly is where we spent a ton of time tonight. So give some thought to that. Item 8 is committee assignments. So this came out of the last meeting in terms of just kind of, obviously Kathy and I are spending a lot of time on the schools right now. Lisa, I believe, is ready to do her land presentation at some point at a future meeting. Andrew had articulated a interest. When I asked him to work on the transfer station, he indicated an interest in recreation. And, Joe and Jeff, I don't know if there's anything you're looking to dive further into. Joe, I heard an interest in recreation as well, but we have to be careful with 1 or 2 members. It makes a big difference from open meeting law. So I guess in general, we should decide, right? Advisory has typically assigned a member to each of the major departments. We haven't done that yet. We've kind of had them come talk to us. They've gone back and done homework. We've had some departments in more than others. So do we want to take that approach? And if we do, how do we want to break it up? We clearly know there's like 5 or 6 departments that are going to come in front of us every year with capital items, right? So it's not like going down every department in town. Or we can just pick projects that are, I'll call it near and dear to either our expertise or what we want to dive into more and feel like could use some work based on what we've done to date. So I guess any thoughts on where you all want to go with this?
I did have one thought, especially over the weekend. I was thinking about the Borough Trail that runs, because it runs basically from Calander almost all the way up to the office parks on the other side of town. And I was wondering if there may be some grant money coming down the road, maybe for bike infrastructure, but we could also use it as an extension of our sidewalk system and use that money to sort of augment the sidewalk and use it as both a sidewalk system and a commerce and a recreation at the same time, because the sidewalk money is going to be limited, but that might be a place where we can get alternate grants, but essentially give us that same infrastructure across the town. And it goes right by the reservoirs. I don't know if that's going to be an environmental problem, but that also gives us a full east-west conduit.
Does anyone know if Trails is working on something around this?
There is a proposed trail. I thought it was 2021 on the trail map.
Because the Borough Trail actually does extend almost all the way over to Algonquin as well, which is the other kind of interesting part of that.
So Joe, are you volunteering to be like a liaison with Trails?
I actually wrote the chair of the committee over the weekend to see what to see if there was an interest in making it a bike trail, but I didn't press any at all. It was just a simple question because I don't know what the environmental particulars are going to be going around the reservoirs. I don't know what's sort of been granted to the committee as far as access and use of that land. So I don't know where it goes. But
I
it's
know-
interesting. It's just an interesting idea because of the scope and the scale of where it goes.
I know that there's been some talk, I don't know if Mark can even speak to this a little bit. I know that there was talk about talking to like CSX to be able to create some type of trail along the railroad tracks as
Yeah.
they go around the reservoir. I don't know where that actually went. I think that's probably a great conversation for, to have with Kat from Trails. She's phenomenal. She's got a really energized committee there now. They've done a lot of really amazing things in the last few years. So I think that would be a great thing
Yeah.
for you to do, Joe.
I'd be more than happy to go on with that. I mean, I love the rail trail over in Marlboro. So that was sort of part of the impetus for the idea was that, we don't really have that. And it would be great to have something similar. It would also be good for the downtown because that trail does run sort of within, if you have a biking crowd, it runs within distance where with just a little encouragement, people might bike up through town, give the businesses a little, little hay and then
Yep.
go on the way. So
So before we talk about anything more specific, I guess, what is the committee's general appetite of, like, that sounds like a project / a committee, right? Andrew, I know, has expressed recreation in general and probably answering Joe's question about a longer term capital plan. Like personally, right? Like I know a little bit about the fire side, right? So that's an easier conversation, right? But everyone has their own interest. So do we want to do that? Or do we want to just kind of do we want to do departments, or do we want to do special projects, or do we just want to kind of let members go off and work through things, just make sure we're not two people tag teaming on something and then just bring it back as a members report? I don't have a perceived view of where we should go, but I just think we should align on that, just to not do things redundantly, but also respect department heads' time or whoever else, but also provide them the right level of support.
Yeah, I think kind of almost like a capital plan review by area would be a good piece. I think, the fire, Chief Achilles certainly has a good idea what he wants to do there, but obviously sit down, review the things there. Joe looking at the Trails Committee and what they have in their long-term plan and making sure it's still, it's either A, in the capital plan now, or B, that they have anything new, we add it. And then there's probably a couple other departments that haven't quite, done that long-term planning. Some probably we should wait for the school committee, like COA, but there's probably a couple other departments that need to look at some kind of a long-term capital plan kind of thought process that could be good to divvy up.
And I think too, it's important that, Jason, Kathy, and Andrew, you're on advisory, so you're going to have liaisons anyway. The Board of Selectmen are talking about liaisons, but Jeff and Joe don't necessarily serve on another committee. So I think there's a priority in my mind to what they would like to focus on, because we have the opportunities on the other committees or boards that we represent. So I'd really like to hear, what they would like to do, because this is their one opportunity to be a liaison, to something. And it is important. It is important to take part and understand, and we all have our wheelhouse, the things that, we have a choice on what we'd like to be liaisons from. So again,
as I was talking about, I mean, if there are grants for it, that'd be great. But otherwise, I mean, that's not the kind of capital bomb I would want to drop in the budget to say, oh, we're going to do a bike path and then boom, I mean, you have the maintenance cost over 20 years plus. I mean, I guess
it's like CPA is a funding opportunity there too, right? So can you take yours broader with CPA, like, for example?
Mm-hmm. That'd be interesting.
Lisa, isn't the master plan committee also looking at things like that or not?
They are. They're looking at bike trails. I know even the downtown initiative is looking at generating the bike trails and stuff to come downtown. I know that's one of the Marty's big things. Master plan is looking at all those things, including trails, Kathy. But I don't think they're looking at it from a capital perspective per se. There is definitely discussion, but not at the high end level.
All right. So does anyone have any objection to Joe liaising with Trails and bringing back updates?
No.
No.
Okay. Jeff, do you have anything you want to focus in
Right
on?
now, let me think about it.
All right.
I don't want to sign myself up for something that's going to be.
Okay. So I guess, does anyone have any objection to Andrew starting to work through with recreation, given some of the comments tonight?
I think that's a good one. See, I don't think we need to do liaisons with everything, but I think that's one that would be a really good one. A few years ago, Rec had $20 million worth of projects on their list. So it's one that really could end up with, big request. And so I think that's a perfect one for us to have a liaison to.
Okay.
Yeah. The other one that might be good, it's already in the capital plan, but libraries. But we're kind of hesitant on the MSBA or whatever the organization is.
Well, that one, they've got their own board of trustees. I think we'll know what's going on there. I don't know. We need a liaison there. I mean, I think you kind of know where you're going. Eventually, you're going to have either a new library someplace, or you're going to have the existing one rehabbed. Rec, there's lots of choices there as far as what can happen.
Yeah, my thought on that one, Andrew, right, is if we see a construction grant cycle starting to open, or they start doing a lot of press around it, that's when we mobilize around that someone to help them. All right, is there anything else? So I'll keep committee assignments on here, because I think if anyone else has another thought this weekend that they see around town that they want to raise their hand for, we can do it that way. Otherwise, we'll just kind of continue to liaise with the departments like we have been thus far.
Do we need to vote for Joe and I to be officially sanctioned liaisons, or we just do it? Okay.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
All right, meeting schedule. So our next meeting, the sole purpose really is going to be to vote in favor of the presentation that is drafted based on tonight's discussion. And I think the conversation will be broader of like where we've been, where we're gone, which we've already laid some of that groundwork with the BOS. But the ultimate goal is that that presentation gets the support of the BOS, or at least a majority on each of these items. And presumably we would use that same presentation to make to advisory and get the same, hopefully, level of support. Then Mark and Brian probably have the clearest marching orders they've ever had this early in the year in terms of what to carry for capital, right? With that one item sitting out there related to Quarterville, but we all kind of know where that's headed. But that's the only thing we've really left open tonight. I'm presuming we'll reach a consensus on schools in sidewalks in that meeting. So the two options we have are to meet at 7:30 on Monday, March 19th. That's PM. Or to meet
October 19th.
Did I say, what did I say, March? Wow. October 19th, 2020. Or we could meet on Thursday, October 22nd, which is when we were originally planning to meet, but we would have to start that meeting at about 6. I'm anticipating no more than an hour. So
better.
What was the first option again? Sorry.
October 19th, which is a Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Do you want to go with that one? No, Kathy's saying no. So
I can't do it. I mean, everybody else can do it if that works, but I cannot do. Then I'm on a plane.
All right. So is everyone available at 6 p.m. on Thursday, the 22nd? Okay. I'm avoiding the 20th because Lisa has BOS, and I'm avoiding the 21st because there's already advisory. That's why I kind of skipped 2 days. I assume we're meeting for advisory that day, right, Kathy?
We are, definitely.
Okay. So we will meet at 6 p.m. on the 22nd. It'll be a light agenda. It'll just be to finalize these items that we left open tonight, and it'll be to review the presentation. I will then post a meeting for Tuesday, October 27th, which is joint with the BOS. So that will work is you won't get a separate link. You'll just join in the BOS meeting, and whoever's running the meeting from the town side will pull us all in. I'm assuming we're first, but if we're not first, whenever we're up on the agenda. And then what I would like to do is get into a regular schedule after that. I'm thinking Monday nights, and I'm thinking 7:30 p.m. based on the prior feedback. But what I want to try and do is not have to send an email changing things. And I think that looks like the best night given what other committees people are on here, given that Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays seem to be spoken for at this point on certain weeks. So I would go to November 9th would be where I would go. And I guess what I would do is schedule us. This is where I need feedback. Do we go every other week or one a month through till the holidays? Here are some, maybe I should tell you what I think is forthcoming. EDC has asked to meet with us about Route 9 in looking into jointly endeavoring with them on wastewater and what can be done there with the primary intent of pursuing some sort of MassWorks grant. So Mr. Wood, I told him, let's get through FY22, but we'd be happy to entertain a conversation. So we need to deal with that. We want to hear Lisa's presentation on land. We're going to have recurring committee updates. Obviously, there's going to be a lot going on with the school piece. Andrew and Joe may have some updates from their pieces. And then I'm sure there's other items I don't even know about yet that will come before us. And we'll also have to start to think through the process to interview owners, project managers. That RFQ has not gone out yet, but just other things that will take time and could easily consume one meeting with just one agenda topic. So any views on how we do this?
Why don't you set them for every other week? You can always cancel it
Mhm.
if we don't have enough to talk about, but at least you got it on a schedule. It's easier to take off than put on, right? At that time of year.
Yes. And obviously, there's no, I don't see any holidays on the calendar, at least I'm looking at on any of those Mondays. But someone please correct me if I've mistaken it or if you find it after the fact. But I think we stay clear of most. All right. Last but not least, public comment. Or one remaining attendee.
Sam.
Not seeing a hand. Is there any other business anyone wants to conduct? All right, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any further conversation? All right, roll call. Braccio,
Aye.
Cook,
Aye.
Hark.
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Pfaff,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Have a good evening.
Before
Aye.
everybody jumps,
Everybody.
never mind. I'll
Nope.
get to it later.